So Betty Mould is sort of responding, and she legitimately so can speak. She was the first female Attorney General appointed in 2009. She's been Attorney General before. During Betty's era, there were concerns that she was not pushing enough and that the NDC were losing cases. At that time, there was a group in the NDC that wanted Georgina Wood, the existing Chief Justice, to be replaced. They wanted to petition the president. I think they did, actually. They did petition the president for the removal of Georgina Wood. The president felt that there was no point, Betty Mould, and the president agreed on that, and then that's what happened. But Betty had issues later on at Attorney General with the whole Warrior matter. However, it is in her place to speak about this because she was she was Attorney General and Minister for Justice. Let's get you a correct background. I'm going to show you first, what did President Mahama say? And then I'll show you what did Godfred Dame say, the Attorney General, about what President Mahama said. And then we will come to this one, what Betty has written. So let's first hear a short video. What did President John Dramani Mahama say?
Recently, so badly has the image of our judiciary deteriorated that many of our citizenry openly make mockery of our justice system and of our justices. The phrase, "go to court," is these days met with derisive laughter instead of hope that one will truly get justice if he went to the courts. If people are not poking fun about politics and inducements being used to sway the hand of justice in the lower courts, then it is poking fun and making statements about the 7-0 of the unanimous FC. One of the scariest existential threats to any democracy is when citizens think their judiciary holds no value for them or no use to them. And this is the security threat that the national security apparatus tried to draw the attention of the nation to recently, but was poorly received by the president and his party. It is scary because it threatens the peace and stability of our democracy, and we must quickly correct this fast-spreading notion. If care is not taken, we'll get to a stage where people will have no qualms about taking the law into their own hands because they do not have the confidence that they can get any justice from the system. There is therefore the urgent need for the Ghanaian judiciary to work to win the trust and confidence of the citizenry and erase the widely held perception of hostility and political bias in legal proceedings at the highest courts of the land. Unfortunately, we have no hope that the current leadership of our judiciary can lead such a process of change. We can only hope that a new Chief Justice will lead a process to repair the broken image that our judiciary has acquired over the last few years. It is therefore worrying that there remains deep-seated perceptions that institutions like the General Legal Council exist to intimidate lawyers who are critics of this government and deprive qualified students from studying for professional law certificates. How do you raise confident, independent, and creative lawyers with a focus on problem solving when during their training you tie their hands behind their back and suggest that they learn to accept oppressive rules without contest? In addition to this is the inexplicable ambivalence of the government and the government-controlled General Legal Council to meaningfully expand access to legal education. NDC stands by its promise ahead of the 2020 elections that it will do all that is possible to expand access to professional legal education and ensure that all who are qualified and aspire to become members of the bar are able to do so.
So this is President Mahama speaking, and then after that, members of the judiciary, the justice delivery system, the Bar Association, some people were not happy, and the Bar Conference was arriving. So the Bar Conference arrived in Ho in the Volta region, and Godfred Dame, the Attorney General, spoke about it. Recently, the president of the Ghana Bar Association, Mr. Yabuafo, has also spoken about it, and Yabuafo's concern is that when people raise criticisms against the judiciary, it should not just be blanket criticism that the judiciary is not doing well. They should say that the judiciary did not do well on this or on that. specifically that in this matter, you remember after the first election petition, which was the 2013 election petition, a conference was held at the British Council Hall in which a member of Council of States, former president of the bar, the Venerable Sami Okujeto, spoke about the ruling that had been delivered by the court, and that in the interpretation of his mind, looking at the ruling that was given, Justice Atuguba actually should have ruled 5-4 in favor of the petitioners. So that's something that that's what the Abuafo was saying, that when you want to criticize the bar, the judiciary, the Supreme Court for that matter, you have to really state what they have done that you disagree with. But to just say that they are doing something wrong and that they have lowered the standards of justice, it's not really fair to the judiciary, and it's undermining of the apex court, which is an important institution for democracy for all of us. Yabuafo said that. But listen to what Godfred Dame said at the bar conference in direct response to President Mahama.
Mr. President, the judiciary has shown consistently that it is the last line of defense for our country. It was thus with great dismay and embarrassment that I heard a person who has occupied the highest office of state, former President John Mahama, recently launched an unwarranted attack on the integrity of Ghana's judiciary. And I observed that this was really the latest installment of systematic and caustic attacks on our court by the former president, albeit unjustified. And I observed that this was really, and I'm compelled to comment on same in this address, because they border on the security of the state and constitute a deliberate pattern of conduct aimed at undermining the independence of the judiciary, an arm of government whose autonomy is crucial to its proper functioning. Such conduct is clearly deplorable, coming from one who has occupied the highest office of president and aspires again to that office. At this moment, it's important for all to note that I express this sentiment not because I stand in opposition to former President Mahama as a politician. My dismay is founded more on the fact that I'm a lawyer, and every lawyer ought to be concerned about these kinds of views expressed by a political leader in this country. It will be a sore omission if I fail to recognize that there have been other leaders of the political party to which the former president belongs. I do not recall either the late Jerry John Rawlings or the late Professor John Evans Atta-Mills mount such a systematic and deliberate campaign of hate against the judiciary. In fact, never once did Professor Mills, Mr. Mahama's former boss, launch any attack at all on the judiciary. Closely examined, one will notice that the source of the former president's unjustified attacks on the judiciary is the unanimous dismissal by the Supreme Court of his rather porous election petition, which indeed, in my respectful view, was dead on arrival and bound to be dismissed by any court worth its salt in the country. One cannot fail to note that his petition before the court in 2021 was a bundle of incompetent claims devoid of any substance. As stated already, the allegations of wrong aggregation of votes, and vote padding, which he put before the court, collectively involved only 6,622 votes, a figure which could not in any way affect the outcome of the presidential election. It is therefore perplexing how, if such a petition is dismissed by the court, it should form the basis for an allegation of unfair treatment by the court. It ought to be understood that it is a duty of the court to administer justice according to law. The court is not a mercy chamber to serve justice based on sympathy or affection. I observed with even greater worry that the former president, who is a non-lawyer, made this comment at a meeting of the legal committee of his political party. None of the lawyers raised a finger to contest the wrong and dangerous propaganda by the former president. By their silence, they became abettors of the propagation of hate against the judiciary.
All right, so that was Godfred Dame. What do you take from that? He says the court is not a messy chamber. That was big, wasn't it? He said it's not a messy chamber that sort of has mercy on people. Okay, so that's the story. And then recently, his Lord Chief Justice, Justice Eni Eboa, also without mentioning names, also told the judiciary that they should be steadfast. They should not be worried about criticisms in that manner. Okay, so there was concern that President Mahama is under attack, and no NDC lawyer who was at the meeting is presenting a defense for him. And MPP people on social media were teasing the NDC that because President Mahama's criticism against the judiciary has no legs to stand on, you see that your own lawyers, Marietta, Betty, Tony Letha, nobody's saying anything about it. So in comes Betty Mould Iddrisu with this statement. So let's have a look at it now. And this is a story called from My Joy Online. Former Attorney General Betty Mould Iddrisu has taken yet another swipe at the judiciary over what she describes as failure to reform to address widespread negative public perception, but rather adopting threats to silence critics. Mrs. Mould Iddrisu, who is Ghana's first female Attorney General, describes attacks on former President John Dramani Mahama as unfortunate, undemocratic, and a slap in the face of Ghanaians demanding fairness from an institution bestowed with powers to protect dictates of the 1992 Constitution. She, Betty Mould Iddrisu, condemned recent attacks on the former president during the recent bar conference and said as a former Attorney General, she can only forgive Godfred Dame for abusing the platform. Okay, very, quote Betty Mould now. It says, very unfortunate for a young Attorney General, Godfred Dame, to come out with such statements about our former president. But what did Dame say about the former president? Anyway, he was disrespectful and very upsetting to me, having held that position before. I forgive him because I am a Christian and it's an act of charity, she told Eric Ahiano on Ideas Exchange, a current affairs program on XYZ TV. Betty Mould Iddrisu says Godfred Dame was disrespectful. And what else? Upsetting. But Godfred Dame called on the former president not to criticize the judiciary. He cited the former president and alleged against the former president that he may be doing so because he lost the election petition. He added that the election petition that came to the Supreme Court, the second one in 2021, was dead on arrival. Does that reflect in the ruling of the court? Because you see, this is a very simple matter to compare with. And later tonight, I'll be showing you a UTV video about this comparative analysis that NDC and NPP have been doing. It's a very interesting video that I picked up. I'll show it to you in a minute. But let's get back onto the story. So Dame is comparing that. Fortunately for us, we can compare because the Supreme Court, very similar judges. I think about 6 of the judges were on both cases, or so 4 or 5 of them, maybe 6 were on both. You can count them. We can count Enieboa, we can count Doche, and I think Agnes Doji and others. So they were there. So the same court, similar people, ruled 5-4 in favor of the respondents in the first one, and ruled unanimously in favor of the respondents in the second one. And that's the point Dame was making, that the porousness of your case was showed and demonstrated by the same court that gave 2 different verdicts to 2 different election petitions. In both petitions, the respondent wins, actually. The petitioner fails in both petitions. In one, the petitioner fails by 5-4. In the other, the petitioner fails by a unanimous decision of the court. So I'm not so sure how that is disrespectful and how that upsets our Auntie Betty Mould. I'm so sorry to hear that. Okay, let's move on though. What else does she say? Mrs. Mould Iddrisu, who could not hide her emotions, emphasized Article 125 of the Constitution says quite clearly that the administration of justice is vested in the people of the Republic of Ghana and is the judiciary who is to administer that. If you don't listen to the people, how on earth can you administer? If you don't listen to the people, how on earth can you administer justice for us? They need to listen to us. This should be a wake-up call. I'm not so sure what Betty Mould is asking the judiciary to listen to the fact that people are saying that they have ruled one way or the other in different cases. But in the last few weeks, the judiciary has made rulings that have not been on the same side as the government lawyers or the Attorney General. So, well, this is for you viewers to make a determination. Those of you who can send text messages, you can send a text message to Good Evening Ghana Official, and we will read it. She added, I chaired that conference of the NDC lawyers, the one that John Mahama addressed, and all of us enthusiastically support his remarks about the perception of Ghanaians waning confidence in the judiciary. Explaining her position, Mrs. Mould Iddrisu said, being a leader of the bar as Attorney General does not give anyone the right to use the Ghana Bar Association meeting to create such chaos. Chaos? She said that the criticism that was leveled by the Attorney General at the bar conference against President Mahama's comments about the Supreme Court can foment and create chaos. Okay, let's move on. She disclosed that she has not paid her dues as a lawyer for the past 10 years because of the partisan actions by such persons who lead the bar. 10 years. But that means Mrs. Mould Iddrisu is telling us that when she was leader of the bar as Attorney General, which is less than 10 years ago, she did not pay her dues as a lawyer. But now let me stay with this a little bit. Did she really say that? She said she disclosed that she has not paid her dues as a lawyer for the past 10 years because of the partisan actions by such persons who lead the bar. Well, maybe at the time she left there. So she became Attorney General in 2009, and I believe she left the Attorney General's office still with the Mills administration, so sometime before 2012, maybe 2010 or 11. Okay, 11 to 22, that gives us how many years? 11 to 21 is 10. Okay, so maybe just after she finished the Attorney General's work, she stopped paying her dues because she said that she stopped paying because of the actions by such persons who lead the Ghana Bar Association. But the leader of the bar is the Attorney General. She handed over to, which Attorney General replaced Betty Mould? I can't remember. Was it Barton Odro or it was Marietta? Marietta was appointed by John Mahama. I have to remember the one who replaced, please find it for me. She was replaced by Martin Amidu. The same man that she sent me a text about. Yes, so since Martin Amidu became Attorney General after her, she has not paid her dues because of the people who lead the bar. But that includes NDC people, because the bar leadership. So the Attorney General is the official leader of the bar. I'm not so sure whether she's referring here to the Attorney General or she's referring to the elected president of the Ghana Bar Association, because he's not the leader of the bar. The leader of the bar is the learned Attorney General. That's the way the bar works. So she was leader of the bar as Attorney General. Every Attorney General is the leader of the bar. So at the time Martin Amidu was the leader of the bar, at the time Marietta was leader of the bar, she, Mrs. Betty Mould Iddrisu, refused to pay her dues because of such persons who lead the Ghana Bar Association. I'm not so sure how we should receive this, but if anybody knows the details, it can help us understand. She continues, so this is a quotation. Our lawyers are extremely upset. I have never had much faith in the Ghana Bar Association because it's lost its capacity to withstand external influences. We saw them at critical times during the previous regime because it's obvious they are favoring one political party or the other. I will pay my dues when I feel the GBA will be fair, a true arbiter of the interest of all lawyers in Ghana, she emphasized. Okay, interesting. This is the real story. So she says that the Ghana Bar Association is not able to withstand external influence. What's the external influence? I'm not sure what that she means by the Attorney General, who is himself or herself the leader of the bar. She says, we saw them at critical times during the previous regime because it's obvious that they were favoring one political party or the other. I'm sure she means they are favoring MPP. She just should have said so directly. Maybe she said so, but the story is written differently. She says, okay, so I'll pay my dues when I feel that the GBA is fair, is a true arbiter of the interest of all lawyers in Ghana. She emphasized, so Betty Mould is not paying her dues anymore. She said the development must be a wake-up call to the judiciary. She argued that several public surveys, observations by renowned lawyers, and civil society organizations have drawn similar conclusions in the recent past. Quote, John Mahama was just asking them to look within, assess what various persons are saying, step out and speak to ordinary Ghanaians themselves and find out what their perception of the judiciary is. It is sad to see and hear the barrage of unjustifiable attacks leveled against the former president. Hundreds of lawyers present at the conference supported the president not because they are NDC, but because 99% of them practice at the bar. They go to the courts daily and they know what is happening in the courts. Yet many may be afraid to talk because they will be victimized, she bluntly said in the interview. Well, that's not so blunt, because she should have really said what they see at the court happening. I think that will be very fair to the judiciary and to be fair to the development of any society, that when an important society, an important arm of government, legislature, executive, or the judiciary, or the media, the fourth estate, if you like, if there's something wrong with it, I think that the stakeholders must say what it is, so that Those of us outside can understand. So you say that lawyers go to the bar and they practice and they know what is happening. It doesn't help us. People must be bold enough to say, this is what happened. This is what happened. I remember many years ago at the British Council Hall, there was a famous Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court had ruled against George Nekeni. Now, George Nekeni had published an article, I believe, in the Chronicle of the Free Press, where he had said something about Chief Justice Aban. And the court had brought him in for contempt. And the court had seemingly held, that truth is not a defense against contempt. Something very confusing like that. That even if what Judge Nekeni said about Justice Aban, who was the Chief Justice at the time, was true, it does not present a defense against contempt of the court and of the Lord Chief Justice, as Aban then was. So a seminar was held at the British Council Hall, and those of us who are interested just jumped in and went there. Odoy Sykes, who was at that time, I believe he was president of the bar, something like that, was leading this conversation. Fortunately for the audience, Justice Joyce Bamford Addo, who had sat on the court as a Supreme Court judge, was in the audience. And so at the British Council Hall, after Justice D.F. Annan, I believe, was chairing, he was then Speaker of Parliament. And also, of course, a famous member of the bar and the bench. And after Odoy Sykes had spoken, Joyce Bamford Addo, during question time, spoke and explained to the audience why the court took that decision. That truth cannot be a defense against contempt, because it's about protecting the office of the learned Chief Justice, and that George Nkeni was out of order. It was very interesting, and everybody was clapping at the time. So that kind of discourse is what we grew up with, studying this democracy of the Fourth Republic, where people are speaking about what has actually happened, and people are challenging the analysis of what had happened. They are challenging the interrogation, and all the issues are being ventilated. But if you say that the lawyers who go to the court, they know what happens and everything that's happening there is no good, I'm not sure how that helps us to build. So you can say that a lawyer went to court, for instance. I will not mention the case's name. The judge ruled so and so and so. The lawyer says so and so and so. Is that the way a judge should rule in Ghana? Without mentioning the name of the judge, without mentioning the name of the lawyers, that gives us something to chew on. That gives civil society something to work on. That gives journalists something to follow up on. But this way of saying it, that the people who go to the courts, they are the people who they know what is happening, without saying anything about what is happening, it doesn't help the discourse. President Mahama says they are the unanimous 11. No, we should have said something beyond that. Look at the election petition that we sent before them. They are saying that they didn't see that this and that happened. How can anyone not see that? Something like that, journalists can latch onto it and find out and get better particulars about why the courts ruled the way they did. Academia will write an article about it, and then we can deal with it. But I'm pleading, so for important people like Auntie Betty, when you are speaking, give us some details so that we can jump onto it and help build a better society. Okay, so that's the end of what Betty Mo said. We thought it was important to bring it to you because we have been doing the story about President Mahama saying something about the court, about Godfred Dame saying something. So it is a sequel to it. Yes, we'll bring it to you. As always, this is Good Evening Ghana, and we bring you all the information.